Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we'll talk a little bit about, we're going to talk a little bit about Apple's WWDC as it relates to 3D and AR. Unfortunately for us, we didn't check the schedule as well as we should have. And the AR sessions are, I expected all the sessions to be released on Monday, but they're not. The AR sessions are happening after this. So it may be a shorter second hour. We will talk about it and answer your questions about what we know so far, but we may use some of tomorrow to talk about that as well. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we have?
Thank you. Appreciate it, Alex. Our first question comes in from Guy Cochran in Seattle. He wants to know what's new with Atomos.
Go ahead, Mitch.
Got a email from them this morning about a device called the Zato. Unfortunately, the link is broken, so I can't get details on it, but it appears to be a handheld monitor device with two big Wi-Fi antennas on it, and it does monitoring from anywhere, streaming, and perhaps other things, but I'm only guessing at this point. So looks like another new.
All I know is what's on the web here. So basically, it's some kind of video assist, or not some kind, but a video assist unit that also makes, it has Wi-Fi. So basically it allows other monitors to monitor what's going on. So on the set, you can basically have, you can hold it up, but you can also just put it on your camera. So it doesn't, you just mount it to a camera. It's a video assist, system. And so then the other, it's got a lot of tools in it. I will say that I think that Atomos is really pushing against Blackmagic's, kind of the Blackmagic video assists have been really amazing. I think Atomos is adding features faster than Blackmagic right now as far as their monitoring system. It also will show up as a webcam. So you can actually have your video go into this and then you can connect it directly to, to your computer and have it join Zoom. So if you wanted someone to watch it here, you could make that available as well. I believe it also streams to Facebook and YouTube and so on and so forth. So that's what it looks like from the press release, at least. I haven't been able to, obviously we don't have any inside information on that, but that's what it looks like from the surface. Go ahead, Ken.
And for those of us who are still playing catch up, I wonder if you could briefly go over the difference between Atmos and Atomos. And exactly. Please explain who's in charge of all this.
Yeah, exactly. Atomos I think pre-existed Atomos, I think. Anyway, but Atmos is obviously the surround format from Dolby. Dolby has Atmos, and that is the difference between Atmos and surround. So you have surround as a 5.1 or 7.1 or those types of things, and those are all channel based and panning based. Atmos is an object-based surround sound platform or protocol. And so basically you can have a lot of objects that you animate inside of the 3D space, and those will eventually be rendered with infinite resolution of position to the listener. So if someone has an Atmos renderer in their AVR, it means that they will decide whether it's 714, 514, 51, 71, 712, any of those. It'll decide where to put those objects based on the number of speakers that you have, as opposed to doing it as a channel-based system. And so that's what Atmos is. Atomos is a company that makes lots of video assist products, and so they make a wide variety of video. That, to make it more confusing, some of the Atomos support Dolby Vision. so there's one of the only ones to do it. So there's a very interconnected thing. One of the things to keep on tracking with Atomos is the Atomos Cloud. So they are really getting to a point where they're building all of these pieces to be able to go camera to cloud to Frame.io, but also for clients to be able to review things and for you to be able to distribute what you're doing on set to other locations. And those are all, kind of getting pulled together all into one neat package, and owning the hardware and the cloud system. Teradek does something similar, but I think that Atomos right now is, Teradek doesn't do as much with monitoring itself. I think Atomos is kind of packaging these all pretty neatly. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think Kenneth brings up a good point, and maybe Office Hours to the rescue. A pronunciation guide posted in Discord that helps us pronounce, all these names like Atomos and Sackler and Chimera. Wouldn't that be handy?
An AJA.
And AJA. It's not AJA.
It's not Aja. Yeah, it's not Aja. I asked someone that would know, and they're like AJA.
I got spanked by them one time over that in front of their booth. They're like, it's not Steely Dan.
All right, next question.
John Preto from Las Vegas, he said, I watched TWIT yesterday, and Leo said there was a problem with our studio, so I'll be hosting from my house. He used Zoom, and it was interesting to see the panel in gallery view. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, beyond gallery view, I'm just blown away by the fact that you can take an entire video studio and put it in Leo's bedroom. Boom. What does that show? The availability of technology has brought to us now. If we can only get around to learning how to use it and how to use it properly, man, the world is your oyster, and that's never been truer than it is with this. I'm just amazed.
Absolutely, John.
I don't know if you saw it, Alex. It was interesting because after watching TWIT for how many years, 18 or something, 17, right. To see, first of all, it's a TriCaster, so I expect there's problems in the studio. But him doing it from his house was interesting. To see the facial expressions of the other people when somebody was talking was valuable.
Right.
It would be nice to see when you and Andy get in your little tiffs to see both of you guys and Leo at the same time. That's super engaging.
Yeah. Mitchell.
Yeah, I frankly haven't watched it in a while. I'm going to make it a point to do that. And their studio is always fascinating because the way they would get those point of view shots and behind the scenes shots, and they would go back and forth to different people, was part of the style and the feel of This Week in Tech. But I'm sorry I missed it because like John was just saying, it would have been interesting to see the reactions for the people and similarities between what we do.
Yeah, it is. What's interesting is Leo very quickly noticed something that we've noticed, which is that the latency is much lower when you're just in a native Zoom environment. So I think that it's the first steps of him stepping towards Zoom ISO. so something that we've all learned is Zoom ISO is in a. What I will say is that in a highly produced, highly organized discussion, there are some advantages to having separate computers for each person. Currently, because we have isolated audio, we have isolated returns. We can give a lot of different things there that are valuable to us. But I think that if those things fade away, I think that we're in a pretty interesting position of really the Zoom ISO changes the whole scale. And as Kenneth was talking about, is that it really is an entirely new level of accessibility for these kinds of broadcasts. Next question.
Scott Mueller from Germantown, New York. For video playback, share screen content from second cam with optimized for video looks way better than spotlighting the same NDI Virtual Camera from vMix, but Zoom defaults to side-by-side mode for screen shares for participants. Is there a better way?
I have to admit that I usually use a head switcher ahead of it. That is the problem. Anytime screen share happens, they're going to build this side by side thing. That's considered the feature that you get to see those things because they don't have that control because the average Zoom user doesn't have a switcher. But the best way to do it, in my opinion, is to switch the main screen. So have a switcher ahead of it rather than if you have to share a second screen, that's okay. But I think that what you really want to do is be able to switch it. Now again. And this is going into a native Zoom experience for that. But I would produce something. I think that what we do here works a lot better. It just depends on what kind of scale. If you're trying to do something just with Zoom, you may be kind of stuck with what there's. The next step up there is to use a switcher. The next step up is to use what we're doing, which is a meeting that projects into a webinar or another meeting, then you have complete control over what that main screen looks like. And the Zoom ISO will, of course, pull those screen shares and all the other bits and pieces that are necessary. Next question.
Tom Ferguson is here from Phoenix, Arizona. He asks, I personally like the new macOS Ventura setting style. It's an iOS style setting and should make navigating easier. Any preferences?
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, with the column layout, it allows you to actually look ahead to the next screen, and that gives you a more intuitive by nature ability to flip through the settings and find what you're looking for. Of course, you can always use the search bar to find what you want to.
Yeah. And this is the new way. Instead of having the panel of all the icons that we've had forever, this is the new way to actually see your preferences going through. Yeah, go ahead, John.
So when Apple started to do this transition a couple iterations back, I didn't like it. I think the iOS interface is too juvenile. I want a more sophisticated look.
I'm so used to the images, so I haven't put the beta on anything yet. So it'll be interesting to see when I get it in there how it feels. Next question.
Tom Ferguson is back again from Phoenix. I'm disappointed with the continued lowering of the security bar for Wi-Fi on iOS. First, they allowed anyone with the Wi-Fi password to share it with another device. Now they're going to make it possible to make the passwords visible. Arrrgh!
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, as a retired IT security guy, I like to maintain control of my Wi-Fi network. Teenagers, on the other hand, don't have the same respect for security and passwords, especially when their friends are involved. So let me get on my soapbox for a moment. You got little Tommy, and he wants to share with little Jimmy, and he can do that straight from his iPhone. Do you lock out your son from your internal network and put him on the guest network? Or does he get to share his password with any of his friends? And then, a few years ago, they allowed it to where the friends could share with their friends. Now they want to make the password visible, so anyone can just copy it off their phone and post it on a bulletin board. I don't like this at all.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think we need to be quiet about this a little bit because I don't want to scare Apple off on getting back into the Wi-Fi business. The airports, I still have a few of them floating around, and I love being able to pump music through them and do other things. And the setups were really easy. So perhaps they'll address those issues when they come out with a hardware device, but I really would like to see it.
Yeah, the answer, by the way, whether you put them on the internal network or the guest network, is the guest network. That's where you put your kids. Sorry, that's what I do. They're on that network because it's easier for me to turn it on and off. So I can turn the network off at night so that they can sleep. So they're not tempted to have a bunch of doing a bunch of things at night, connected to it. So I definitely think that if you're worried about security, you should have a router that is capable of building a couple different systems that let you control that. And I do agree with you that I was excited when I use the feature all the time of letting other people use it. When you said that they're going to expose the password, I was like, what? Because the problem with exposing passwords is not just giving them access to the Wi-Fi. The potential is really, this is the part that people don't get, is that it shows a pattern of how you build your passwords. And so someone who, it's not just them getting to your password, it's seeing how you build them. Do you use certain characters? Do you use these things? And it saves someone who wants to hack into everything else you're doing. Now, I don't worry about that as much because almost all my passwords are hashes. They're just randomly generated 26 characters of hash. And the ones that matter are long phrases that you couldn't guess. It would be very hard unless I've never said them out. I literally have phrases that I've never said out loud my entire life that are there. It'd be very difficult unless you did a keystroke, but you'd never get to them, and they're pretty long. So those are the only things that I worry about there. But there are some things like my Wi-Fi password that's a little shorter because I want to be able to type it in. And so I think that does become more problematic. So hopefully we'll see. Of course, Apple, I don't know if this is connected, but Apple, of course, is getting rid of passwords. So maybe they're like, hey, we'll just let you do whatever you want with passwords because we have passkey. And so eventually you'll only be able to get on with biometrics. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is here. His question is, how do you develop trust, confidence, and connection within a distributed team?
Go ahead, John.
Douglas, sounds like you're moving down the path of software development. What happens with software guys is they're all using it. If you're on a team, they're all using a Git repository. So usually it's GitHub. And once you check in your code, it's there for everybody to see. And then the team starts reviewing. Your manager should be doing code reviews with you, but the other team members get to see your code. And that's how you build trust and confidence, as you review your peers' code. And that's what happens.
Good, Mitchell.
Yeah. Share your Wi-Fi password. That's how you build that trust.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think that beyond the writing solid code, there are things that you can do that will increase confidence. Number one is being very responsive online. So when people are sending you emails, you send them right back. That they feel like you're there. So and being to the point in those areas. kind of want to look at every email that you send as kind of both a service and a liability. Adding lots of writing long emails, a lot of people won't read them. So you just have to know that if you're writing an email longer than about 10 lines, most people, a lot of people will just kind of glaze over. And so there's that whole, I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short one. Take the time to write a shorter one. For the most part, if you mostly send very short emails, if you send a long email, it means it's important to people. Like it's saying that, but that should happen like once every 2 or 3 months. Like more, for me, like I think that you shouldn't write an email longer than about 10 or 15 lines more than every 2 or 3 months. Like it's just stick to the point. People just glaze over, and then you just become a talker to them in a corporate environment. And everything you say is something that you're now building a legal document around as well. So you just need, every email is a legal document. So just remember that as well as you start to write emails. In addition to that, I will say that when you go on meetings, having a very solid setup makes a difference. It should just be about what you know how to do and what you're doing, but it makes a massive difference in how you occur for people. And so you really want to think about looking good and sounding good, and being, looking like you're in control of that process is definitely a very valuable thing to do. And again, it's a subconscious thing that affects people, but it absolutely does. And so you really want to think through your setup and how you present yourself. And again, there is when in meetings, you want to try to say as little as possible. Just say what you need to say, and say things that matter. But you want to try to avoid running on in most of these things, like I am right now. Kenneth.
And in any organization, keep your promises. And as JJ says in the chat over here, send them pizza. So that's one way to keep a connection going, right? Food matters.
Pizza and M&Ms, but not together. Next question.
JHB from New York. Is the Alex InfoComm webinar presentation at 4:30 Vegas time? Thanks.
Yes, I wrote that pretty quickly this morning because I realized I was off. Now, so this is kind of cool. So we're Sam from Zoom is going to be he's going to be in at InfoComm, and I'm going to be remote. so it was funny. I complained because I couldn't get everyone to show up for me for WWDC, but I was like, I can't go to Vegas. I don't have enough time to fly to Vegas and back right now. And so Sam was, and we decided that months ago. So Sam has built a great kit for the integration. And so they're going to be putting that together, and I'm really excited about it. And so one of the things that we got the okay from InfoComm is to include all of you. So there's a link in the email that went out this morning. If you register for that, there'll be a webinar that InfoComm will join. And of course, I'll be in it because it's my webinar. And you can join that and ask questions in the Makana, standard Makana that we have for office hours. So we'll answer questions from the room, but we're also going to answer questions here. This is we're doing the thing that I tell no one to do, and we're going to see how it goes, which is a hybrid event. So Sam and I will be talking about just approaching events and event production, and we will, but we'll be doing it in a hybrid way, and we'll see how this goes. Go ahead, Mitchell.
What time is that running, Alex?
4:30 Pacific Standard Time. And it is, it's 4:30 Pacific. We're going to open at 4, so I'd recommend getting in a little early, and you can go ahead and start asking questions at that time too. And it'll go until 5:30 Pacific Standard Time. Next question.
The Seventh Scroll in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, guys. What are the real blessings in using an audio console with 2 input cards? Example, Dante and soungrid. Is it a worthy buy, once, cry once option?
I have to admit that the only thing that I have for input cards is Dante. Like I don't have a lot of other things that we use. You can get a MADI card. That might be useful for kind of cross-pollinating there, or a USB card that you can connect it to the computer. But the only one that we use typically is Dante. Well, the Dante card, though, is way different because the Avios, which Mitchell's showing, is just a couple channels. The Dante is all the channels. Well, it's 64 channels going in and out of the mixer. So you have a lot more capacity for that. Next question.
Next question from Julian Meinhold in Dortmund, Germany. Yesterday, the EU passed a law that requires USB-C as the charging standard for devices like phones, cameras, laptops, headphones, etc. What will be positive or negative about it?
Go ahead, John.
Somebody in the government's got frustrated like me because in my briefcase over there, I've got a bag full of adapters. And this has been talked about on TWIT ad nauseum. And so it's interesting to see what Apple's going to do to cure this problem. I think they should put USB-C. They already have it in the iPad. I wish it comes down to the iPhone, but who knows? They talk about doing wireless only with no connectors. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting.
There you go, Tom.
While USB-C would be convenient, I don't see letting the government dictate how technology needs to go forward is a good thing. It just kind of bothers me.
It's a 10-year-old format. So it's a 10-year-old format, and it is, it took them this long to get here. It hasn't been approved all the way through, so we'll see how that goes. I think it's by the end of 2024, so that gives Apple 2 more revs to make changes to it. I could also see Apple just to show them is only sell ones without any ports in Europe. Like the European one would just be like, and there's no ports. That would take them another 5 years to figure out how to solve. I think that I personally think the USB-C format. I think my biggest complaint is it's just a disaster. Like you don't know what it does. You don't know how it. You pick up a cable and you have no idea whether it's going to be power only, slow, fast. What it means. They made it so flexible that it's almost, it's borderline unusable. Like I have to test every cable and mark them all because of the way the format is. So they picked a format that is bad, that's 10 years old, rather than like, let's work together with the industry and figure this out. And maybe it'll take another 5 years to figure it out and that'll be fine. But now they're implementing something. And the problem we really have is that our representatives are technological children. Like we just have to understand that. Just every time I think about them telling us what to do in tech, I think about the fact that I think about 12-year-olds doing heart surgery, and so and how much I would not like that. And so it's pretty much anything that they do. It makes me worried because they just have no idea what they're doing in that area. I'm not saying that they're politicians. They know a lot of things about a lot of things, but they don't know anything about technology. I can tell you from a lot of experience that they barely know how to use email. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, my main beef with USB-C is like Thunderbolt cables. They're not mechanically secure. They don't really secure well in the devices you plug them into. And so far, they haven't worked around that. Yeah,
my biggest problem is just that I don't know what I'm plugging in. Like, I just don't know. Like, I don't know I don't know how many USB-C cables, and they're all different. And there's no obvious marking on the outside that tells me what they are. Some of them came with things, some of them didn't. And it's a disastrous format. And the fact that they made that the standard illustrates what I just talked about. Next question.
I was going to grab one, but too late. The Seventh Scroll in Brooklyn, New York. On set for wireless audio, would you recommend 2 separate belt packs for the talent? One for wireless inner ear monitor and one for the wireless mic?
Oftentimes you have to do that. So, I mean, you don't have that. There's only a handful of systems that will let you be integrated. So the Microflex will do it. And there's a couple other ones that will integrate those together. The Microflex is very convenient because of that. We can give someone an in-ear monitor and a mic. There is a little bit of digitization that you can hear if you really are listening on good headphones, but most people can't hear that. But that's the one problem with the Microflex, in my opinion. As far as the separate belt packs, again, you often end up, and you'll see this in talent. If they turn around on TV, you'll see two little packs. One is their in-ear and the other one is their mic. Sometimes it's both mic. So both of them are mics. But if they have an in-ear monitor, that second wireless is their in-ear. And sometimes they have 3 packs because they have the primary mic, backup mic, and in-ear. So that it does become kind of a process. Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana. I've got a nonprofit 2 hours away that wants me to start broadcasting their meetings. I'm thinking about a Mac Mini zoomroom setup with 2 obsbot Mini 4Ks and a Rode Go 2. Thoughts? It's for an older techie, non-techie crowd, excuse me.
I guess the question really is are you doing it or are they doing it? What is available for it? The OBS bots look reasonably okay. For that, I haven't been able to test them too much there. I think that could definitely work. It depends on what kind of meeting. I usually find that 2 cameras oftentimes is a little bit of difficult. You're kind of between 2 different things. You have a single camera, which is just a wide shot, or you have 3 cameras, which allows you to get close-ups and cut between those close-ups. When you have 2 cameras, you just end up with constantly going back to the wide and then readjusting. So that's the only thing to think about. Oftentimes, I would use a 3rd camera in that environment. Next question.
Next question comes from me. Where's a good place to go for special effects and breakaway props?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
It's funny. I rarely ever need anything like this, but just once in a while, something comes along and you need. For example, I'm doing a shoot where we have to simulate that the glass is being cracked on the TV monitor. In other words, somebody throws something at the TV and it goes. And I was thinking of doing it as a practical shot or doing it in post. But this company called New Rule Effects has all kinds of breakaway stuff.
That's cool.
Including gallons of fake blood, which, I don't know what the use of that would be for, but breakaway bottles, props, and things like that. It's kind of cool. You never know when you're going to need something like that.
For blood, it's corn syrup. Corn
Very
syrup
hard to
is
clean
key.
up.
Corn syrup and yeah, because it just has the right consistency. I was on the set of Dexter many years ago, and so there was a lot of blood around, and the ones that were on the ground were actually like they were plastic. Like it was like just a hard piece that you could set down, but the stuff on folks was, I'm pretty sure it was some very sticky substance. Yeah, I by the way, as far as the effect there, I would recommend doing that in post. Something like a planar tracker like Mocha. Is a really good planar tracker. So if you have most of it in frame as it happens, or you set it up that way, it'll track that really well. And then you can just add the cracks to it. It just gives you a lot more control. Unless you have a really good special effects team, getting it right is a thing. And you just end up getting something that's close. The other thing that you can look at is if you set it up so that there's a highlight coming at a grazing angle, it'll see cracks. And the reason we do that for rain, it's really useful because, or if you backlight it. For rain, we've done things where we had to do rain coming, going past a windshield behind somebody for a car shot. And we literally had a camera and we put it underneath the glass. We had a big pane of glass. And then we shot it at a grazing angle so that you'd see the rain there. And then we had a really high speed fan pushing across the glass, and we just drizzled water on it, and it did the thing where it kind of moves along the glass. But we used that, and then we just were able to comp it as a screen. We just screened it over the glass on the outside, or screened it behind it, and that screen gave it the screen effect. You saw what you needed to see to believe the rain, and it was a remarkably good rendition of rain. You could do the same thing with the cracks. Go ahead, Mitchell.
That's really cool. I just like to brag that I've done practical effects before. I'm a post guy, and I do special effects all the time. But to do it practically or in the camera is just neat.
Yeah. There was a shoot recently in our office that was all miniatures. It's just amazing to look at like highly detailed miniatures that took months to make, and then you shoot them for a day, and then you're done. Next question.
Todd Perry from Prescott, Arizona. Suggestions for remote Zoom question and answer interviews for education. These would be captured and edited later, not live streamed. Very simple kit to send out for non-technical types. Best way to output high-quality Zoom footage.
Yeah, I think that I don't know if you want to use. I don't know if Q&A. There's a couple different ways to do it. We've done a lot of these Q&As. With Zoom, we make sure that we use something like Zoom ISO to be able to record it on our end, rather than trying to record it on the far end. There's not a lot of good ways to do that, unless you send out a camera that can record internally. So you might be able to send out a camera. And the problem we run into there is that you're always dependent on them to push record. And it seems like a simple thing. It's not. It's not like they just go, oh, I didn't hit the record. I didn't hold it down long enough or whatever. And so not having the control. And I actually think this is a big missing in the market is that we don't have better solutions for remote control hardware that's on the other end that really lets us take complete control of it to do this kind of thing. Now, other things that you can look at is Riverside FM will do records locally and then upload them. And Stream Voodoo actually does that as well. It does a local record. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Isn't there a portable Interatron that'll put the interviewee and the interviewer on the same device?
It is. The problem is you want to get a high quality output. You're looking for a full HD output there. I mean, what you want is something that would tie in, maybe a Zoom app or something like that would tie into Zoom to let it record locally. Like, I'm going to record the camera, and I know that it's being recorded and it's giving me feedback that it is, and that type of thing would be great. We just don't have that yet. So hopefully someone will develop something like that. Next question.
Andy Kochendorfer from Viera, Florida. Thoughts on diffusion filters for Zoom presenter cameras?
I will argue that great lighting will go a lot further than diffusion filters. I think diffusion filters look weird. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Sorry. I like the S-Cinetone that Sony's have. There's a number of different settings that you can accomplish certain things that are normally done with a filter. Although on mine, I've got a little bit of, I've got a black filter on it. I think a 2. Yeah.
So I don't. Mist. Yeah, Pro Mist is kind of what people talk about a lot for these kind of diffusion filters, and I'm not a huge fan of them, but I think good lighting will go further. Next question.
Stephen Kimborough of Berkeley, California. Maybe off topic, Alex, but I heard that John Foster has passed. Anyone know anything?
For those of you who are here, John Foster was an old friend of mine. When we got to know each other talking about, talking at the Bay Area Media Graphics events that we had years ago. And, John was just an amazing guy. And he was really part of the early formation. I actually shared an office area, not the office, but we were in the same floor. And the two of us would spitball, BitTorrent before it existed. Like, this is how you would make this more efficient, because we were dealing with the issues of video early on. He was really a master of interactivity. He also named the Pixel Core. So we were talking about it, and he was like, well, it's kind of like a Marine Corps. It's very formal, and we're trying to take over the world. And he said, and it was also, and he said, but it's up with pixels. It's like a Pixel Core, and that was how the name began. A lot of thought processes around Pixel Core and everything else was, brainstorming sessions with John. He was in This Week in Media pretty frequently, sometimes on Mac Break in the early days. Just really, really a great guy. And he passed last week. And I don't have the details of how he passed, but I know he had some health challenges in his later years. And so I think that I'm pretty sure it was something not related to COVID or something else like that. It was just, I think that, but he was a great guy. Anyway, next question.
Nick Matt from the UK. My audio to Zoom or vMix always seems low resolution compared to others, like it's a low data rate MP3 rate, no matter what my path. He's using a Hiel PR 40, a Scarlett T2i2. Where should I look?
Go ahead, John.
Not sure about the vMix side, but on the Zoom side, and Nick, you probably already know this by now, but the obvious things are to make sure you have original sound on, and then the high fidelity settings inside Zoom. I don't know anything on the vMix side.
I get rid of the Scarlett. Yeah, sorry, but that's actually, that kind of sound is something that we've heard with the Scarlett, and it's some kind of combing or something that goes on inside of it. And, oftentimes a bunch of resets and a firmware update has fixed it over time. But the low end, the Scarletts, I mean, anything that, I don't know, I think that anything that Focusrite makes that's below $250 is, garbage. So anyway, so that's, and I apologize for being so rough about it, but it is literally the biggest suck time. Those Scarletts are the biggest time suck of everything that we do. If someone gets one and we're just like, ooh, this is going to be, I have to, if Shannon's doing the test, I have to go in to be part of it, because something's going to be messy. And the problem is, even it might work on the test and then it won't work in the show. So it's a piece of equipment that I don't have an opinion about it randomly. We have opinion about it because we have an enormous amount of tired tracks over us that say Scarlett all over it. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I recall you saying that you can do like a tech check and it works just fine. Then when you go online,
and like 15 minutes before someone shows up and it's not working, some channel isn't working, something isn't going. But the first thing, the Hiel PR 40 should be full sound. The first thing I would do is you can keep the Scarlett. You don't have to get rid of it, but put something else in there. Almost anything. Shure X2U, I'm trying to think, some of the Zoom stuff in the lower end, the Mix Pre 3 or 6, all of those things are going to give you a better interface to what you're doing. What's the Behringer Flow 8 is another good interface. So those are all options that I think would be better than the Scarlett. So anyway, it's a miss. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael returns with the question, what do you think of apps like Mixhalo? There's a link, and Peex, another link, that deliver concert audio to your mobile device. Do you think that it degrades the concert experience or improves it?
I think it depends on how well you hear, how well you're in and what you want. Concert audio in venue is not very good. So I think that what the attempt here is to find a way to, it's just loud, concert audio in a venue. I mean, I work on concerts, and it's no matter how much they try to, it's still pretty mono, very loud. It's got a lot of variables in the space that make it not as good. So the interactivity is really important, but the actual quality is pretty low. So I think that's the challenge that you have. And I think these are probably an attempt to give you a more immersive sound. The problem is you lose the interactivity that is really what makes the concert worth it, because it sure ain't the sound or the visuals most of the time, because the unless you have really good seats, you're sitting somewhere very far away looking at a jumbotron that is the equivalent of like a 5-inch screen. Yeah, so it better be the interactivity. Go ahead, Mitchell.
What do you do to protect your ears when you're in a loud environment like that and be able to, make calls? Well, I don't, and to make call. Well, I'm very rarely in the environment when it's really loud. I'm usually in some box somewhere very far away.
I mean, we did a show at AT&T Park with Metallica, and I was outside of the arena, outside of the stadium. so literally I'm in a box because I can't hear what I'm doing and I can't figure out whether it's working or not if you're in the venue. So we just want the video feeds, like we just get the video feed and we get and in that case, we had someone running Pro Tools on the far end, remixing all the stems for the online, and they needed to be away from the stadium as well for the same reason. You don't want to basically corrupt what you're listening to in the process. And so I don't have to interact with that much. And I spent a lot of time going to concerts that were really loud, and now I have tinnitus. so I'm never alone. I always have like a little hum in the background. So, and I don't really, I have to admit, I work on a lot of concerts, but a lot of them are virtual, or I'm working on them and I'm somewhere else. I actually don't enjoy going to concerts with lots of people anymore. I think that it's a wide mixture of, I think the audio isn't very good. I think it's uncomfortable to stand for 2.5 hours. If I'm not standing, I'm too far away, and there's this kind of jacked up audio sound that I don't really enjoy. And I've worked with too many security teams, and I know that every time you go to a large venue with a lot of people, you're at risk. There's nothing, all the stuff that they do, and when you walk in is theater. Because they can't really stop anything. Next question.
And it's from Kenneth Jones in Seattle, Washington. I hear that Guy Cochran is at InfoComm 2022. What's that all about?
Well, if Guy was here, we would know, but I don't know what Guy's doing there. He's got a booth. I think he's got the one-man production thing that he's showing off. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I think the fact that he's not here means he's there and he's busy. Otherwise, he'd probably check in. But yeah, he was talking about the booth setup and the things that they were going to be displaying at the show. So wish him the best of luck.
Yeah, I think that what he worked on with Memo Live, the one-person studio looks pretty amazing. It looks like it's a really great solution, and I think he's going to do really well with that. Next question.
Keenan Campbell from Princeton, Illinois. With so many online project management tools, what does the team like or dislike? Pros, cons, and suggestions.
Go ahead, John.
Man, this is a sticking point for me, and I had to add up my years in professional work, and any type of a process that adds a functional block diagram into a process of getting work done always falls apart. And we've tried them all, and they all seem to fall apart. If you find one, let me know. The one that the software developer guys like these days is Jira.
Yeah, it is. I find that most of the stuff that we're doing to manage it, it all still keeps on coming back to Google Docs. Like Miro is something that we've used as far as like designing and brainstorming. So I don't know if you've used Miro in the past, but Miro is it is kind of a brainstorming. I guess you could use it for project management, but it's really like you can put a lot of the way it's used when I use it is you can drop up stickies and put little things around it and build this huge whiteboard full of ideas and thought processes and everything else. And it's a pretty interesting tool. I work with a company that uses it for their software development planning, and I found it to be very, very useful. I don't use it myself yet, but I keep on thinking about it based on those experiences. It's just another thing that I have to learn. In the standard project management, most of what I see is still Google Docs. Next question.
And it's from Robin Cutshaw in Atlanta, Georgia. She asked the WWDC 2022 developer videos have speakers with perfect complexions not available through makeup alone. Is this a new feature of Final Cut Pro?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Not necessarily. It could be a plugin that you can use in pretty much everything, and that's where the plugins are kind of going. Magic Bullet from Red Giant, now Maxon. Boris has it, and there may be some native stuff that you can do inside of Final Cut to allow touch-ups. We're not talking about de-aging, but things that would get rid of imperfections in the skin and colorations and things like that. So, yeah, it's a thing now.
Go ahead, John.
They have it in Zoom. It's called Touch Up My Appearance on and off, and it smooths out the face. See the difference? I'm clicking on it right now. I don't know if you can but it smooths out the complexion.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I have a feeling that there's a mixture of makeup as well as there is makeup as well as just picking the people that are going to speak. Are probably those two things are probably pretty connected to it, and of course they do have probably some filtering that's required, but I bet you they're not doing that much filtering. I bet you that I haven't seen anything where I looked at it where I thought they were actually filtering the data. But I do think that I will say the videos are way better than I've watched a lot. Just go back a couple of years. Just go back to 2019. Look at those videos, the live videos of people presenting, and go back forward to the videos of people actually, doing this. I was just this morning, because I was prepping for this show, I was watching the room scan video and thinking, other than they talk a little slower than I prefer, but I can, it was much better than anything they would have done on stage. And the problem was, before they were trying to fit into a window. So someone would speak and it would be 30 minutes or 35 minutes or 40 minutes long. And a lot of these are 15 minutes long because that's how long it takes to get through it. You also get through it faster when you're editing it. You can cut through it faster than someone can actually do it live. So I would highly recommend, looking at some of these videos. I think it's the future. I don't see any, I don't see any reason to do it on stage anymore. Like it's just because you're not asking. Apple doesn't open for questions, so why bother? Next question.
And Tom Ferguson from Phoenix is here. For now, Apple is limiting undo send on mail to 10 seconds. You better have fast reflexes if you have buyer's remorse. Thoughts? Go ahead, Tom.
Well, this kind of reminds me of the old 10-second delay on live television programs. But other than that, you just better think about what you put in that email because it doesn't give you long to yank it back.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it's getting to be it's looking like magic, but the reality is it's just a simple caching, and you could probably do that just by putting a cache in your head, which I wish I could do sometimes. But essentially, To take back a email that already went out is impossible. You can't do that.
Although it does look like you can do it with iMessages. So next question.
Next question from Tom Ferguson from Phoenix. Apple's iOS 16 will finally allow people to edit messages sent via iMessage and even completely unsend them if they want to. But they'll need to be quick about it. They'll have just 15 minutes to do either. I like this feature.
And for our producers, we're cutting through these questions very quickly. We're almost out. So if you have more questions for the first hour, go ahead and throw those in. Otherwise, we'll stretch until the end of the hour. Go ahead, John.
Can't tell you how many times in my career I've tried to pull out my Ethernet cable because I sent
I have done that
the
too.
wrong thing to the wrong person.
No. And it's like the back of your your lower brain just goes, you just sent that to the wrong person, or you attached the wrong. Oh my goodness! And you're trying to figure out how to. That's the best part of Ethernet is you have somewhere, one place that you can pull it out. I've had ones with large files that I actually successfully pulled the Ethernet, out of the wall to because it was a big file. It was still going up and killed it. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, opposite my answer about email, autocorrect is my nemesis. I often send a message and then see what iMessage sent is not what I typed. This works for me.
Yeah. I have both the affliction and the advantage of having pretty bad dyslexia. Oftentimes, the first time I write a paragraph, it's barely English, and so I have to pass through it a couple times before. And it's also why you don't get a lot of long emails from me. If you get a long email from me, just know how much work that was for me to do. so like it was an enormous amount of lifting for me to write you 3 or 4 paragraphs. It's because of that, most of my emails go out pretty well. They're very short and they're pretty well figured out because I've had to read them over and over again. And you'll often, anything that I think is important, you'll see me sitting there reading them out loud to make sure I didn't do something with them because I'm always terrified that I'm going to leave huge chunks of the number one thing that I forget when I put things out is the reversals. So the nots. So I say, I would, when I say not want to do this, it'll say, I want to do this. I forget those little things. And so I have to be very careful of the reverse because I will send something out with 3 or 4 reversals in it if I'm not careful. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah. Why stop at iMessaging and email? Why can't we put it into our brains that when you say something incorrect or unfortunate for whatever reason, wouldn't it be nice to be able to take it back and it never happened?
There's a short there somewhere. There's a short there somewhere.
I just did it a minute ago, and it's like, oops, I shouldn't have done that, and I can't take it back.
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, don't worry about a lot of us are less Dixic one way or another. But I'm more concerned. Yeah, I'm more concerned about a feature called non-repudiation. If you've got a 15-minute timeline to say I didn't say what I just said, I'm concerned about what the response might already have been. That's a long time for people to take what you just said and then respond incorrectly to it and go off on a tangent somewhere. I'm worried about that. I think once said, it needs to be retracted officially and apologized for if necessary, rather than just trying to make it as if it never happened. That's bothersome.
Yeah. So I will say that for me, I try to get better. I have a problem that my typing voice is much rougher than my speaking voice. So if I text something, I'm slightly frustrated. It'll sound like I'm just scathing. So I'm always trying to figure that out. But my typing voice is very different than my speaking voice, and I it's been that way forever. Like I type a different way than I speak. So if I dictate something out, it'll sound like one person, and if I type it, it'll sound like a different person, mostly Mr. Hyde. So if I'm not careful, go ahead, Mitchell.
Isn't it possible to add a disclaimer that I apologize in advance for anything I do that may be wrong, and then you're covered?
Yeah, that's we'll see.
Doesn't work that way.
No.
Well.
Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana, for small hybrid production Cinamaker seems to tick most of the Zoom and in-person mix boxes. Since it has ISO or ISO audio for Zoom participants built in, is anyone using this in their production workflow?
I don't think anyone is. I will admit, for me, I'm not a big software event person. I say that this whole show is built on a bunch of software, but we control it, and we still have little glitches here and there. So I think that we're still working through that. So I haven't, and then putting it on the iPad makes me more nervous, or on the computer. So we need to test it more. I would say, because I think that Cinamaker has a lot of possibilities. I'm just not sure. Next question.
Kenny Hampton from Greenville, Illinois. You have mentioned lower cost AD converters for streaming and recording. What is the panelist opinion of Audient converters?
I don't know if we have used Audient converters. These are, I'm not familiar with the name. So you can hear the clicking that you hear us all doing is us all typing in, trying to figure out, oh, yeah, I don't, they look interesting. I mean, I think that it's not a brand that we've used. So it just hasn't come up in our conversations. They look like, they look reasonable, but I don't think that we have it says your recordings made better. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it. Maybe we should do some more research. So yeah, we don't know. Now go ahead, Mitchell.
Not to be confused with Dante.
Yeah,
because it's close.
Next question.
Next question from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Lighting color temp strategies. Do you optimize for the camera sensor or use color temp for effect? For example, cool subject and warm background. What lighting purchasing decisions take color temp into consideration?
Go ahead, John.
This is interesting. I learned most of this from Alex on office hours. Is I finally got my color chart. I don't have the expensive one like Alex has, but I got the same one Jason Bass uses. And to try to paint these 12K cameras live was a chore. And so setting up the lights and then bringing that footage into DaVinci to set up a custom LUT into the camera was a process. But you get through it and you learn a lot, actually.
Yeah, and what I will say is that I almost always use 56K lights because you're dealing with, when it comes to lighting, I'm just dealing with the environment. The windows are the hardest thing for me to control. So I very rarely shoot 3200 temperature because of that. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, my main key light, which is a light panel, is a bicolor lamp. I always start with daylight, which is right around 5600. But then if you just need to warm it up, and I got it just outside of blue right now to warm the face up a little bit. So that's another way to do it.
The one thing I would almost never do is a cool, like in this sense, I know you're just using it as an example, but using a cool subject and a warm background is something I would almost never do. I would almost always do the reverse, a cooler background with a warmer color for the subject. Next question.
Robin Cutshaw from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm considering setting up a video comparison between several concurrent cameras. Blackmagic, Canon, Leo Cam, Sony Cam, etc. Has anyone already done this?
Go ahead, John.
I used to have this set up in for after hours. I would come in with 3 of my different cameras, the Brio, the built-in, and then the C920. But I also have a side-by-side comparison on the 12K versus the Sony. So I do this a lot. The Sony, the low light on the Sony kills the 12K, by the way.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is here, and he wants to know, what do you think of Apple introducing Apple Pay Later? Do you think Apple will ever partner with a bank and take the banks out of the loop?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
That was one of the questions I asked when we were monitoring WWDC, is that they're looking more and more like a bank, so maybe they should just be one.
Go ahead, John.
DeFi is the term that we use. I'm not a fan of banks. I'm not a fan of banks. It's interesting. They're in the finance business. I have to take a closer look at what they're doing, but they've already partnered with Goldman on their card. And so they're moving down this pathway.
I'm curious. I don't know. I don't know how they're. I think they're just, the interesting thing here is that everybody else is trying to make money. So everyone else doing the buy now, pay later is adding a small increment to the cost, either taking it away from the salesperson. So whoever's doing the sale, might lose 2% or 5% or whatever. So they're trying to cut something off the top. It doesn't look like Apple's doing that. It looks like Apple is giving the person selling you something the amount that they sold it at. And in fact, it looks like they may be giving it to the vendor in it, as if it was the whole payment. And then they are giving, they're not charging the user either. And it looks like the angle for Apple is just value of the phone. Like literally they just want you to buy more phones, and that's their angle, and they're making the money on that. And it's devastating if that's the case, because it is very hard to compete with people who have to play on the same playing field. Like you're not, like they have to make money somehow and you don't. It's like a I call it a Kaiser Soze model, which is that he always made money on something else. Like it wasn't, you always get overpaid. You always, got paid more than the job was worth, and so anyway, it is. And Apple, I think, is continuing to do this. Which is that they and it is, I think that the danger that Apple has really is the monopoly, because they don't own a majority in anything, so they're literally, and so they can do a lot of these things. But once you have a majority status, using your size in one market to leverage yourself into another market is exactly what monopoly laws are designed not to allow you to do. And so I think that it's going to be really interesting to see. I think monopoly is still the biggest problem that Apple has in the next decade, just because they operate much more effectively than everybody else, and so it's not that they're just using their size, they're just better at it, and so when they go into it, they're really looking, when they're ruthless about being customer first. And not everybody is. And so I think that it's going to be very, very hard for banks and a lot of these services to compete in this market over time. Next, go ahead, Mitchell, real quick.
Yeah, most banks have the Federal Reserve. Apple has a giant bank account of cash.
Yeah. And so it's a really hard model to compete with. And it does mean that a technology company is infinitely scalable if they do this. And the other thing to track is the fact that eventually, if they let you put savings in and paid you interest, they would have a closed system. They were using your money to loan money to people buying their products. Like literally, it doesn't have to go anywhere else. Like it could just totally be you putting your money into the quote unquote Apple bank. They're paying you interest. They could potentially pay you more interest than a bank, because it's a completely closed system for them. And so that should terrify a lot of people at Wall Street. Next question.
Tyler Roberts from Chambersburg. What is a good mount to mount a Ninja 5 to an R6 with a small rig cage? My current mount keeps failing.
I think the question is whether you are trying to mount it directly or whether you're putting it on an arm. If you're putting it on an arm so that you can move it around, the only arms to use on a camera, in my opinion, when it matters, is a Noga, an Noga Noga arm. It is much more stiff than the Newers, and I bought lots of both. But the Noga arm is a much heavier, much stiffer arm to put on it. Now, if you're putting it directly on it, I don't know what's happening, but if you're trying to put it on an arm, take a look at the Noga arms. They are far stiffer and far more robust than anything you're going to see now they're expensive. They're $100, $120 each for a little one, but they're worth it. Next question.
Tyler Roberts from Chambersburg again. Any good recommendations for a 24-inch monitor that has solid touch interface? Trying to add more touch functionality to my Ross Ultra using dashboard.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm just going to give you a little piece of advice. I've done this before with a touch, thinking it's going to be better, and I use it for a while. It's like a gym membership for me. I use it, and then I forget that I have it, and then I completely ignore it. So before you rush into it, consider your alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, it has. I mean, you just want, what you're really looking for is a really high quality touch. I wouldn't use it necessarily for the Ross Ultra. So the Ross Ultra, by the way, is the I believe is the router, and so it could work as far as that goes. I would never do touchscreens with switchers. It's a bad idea because you need to be able to feel what you're actually pushing on to make that work. And I've used them to do basic switching. Actually a Wacom tablet to do that. But I don't, the best monitor with a touch interface is the Wacom tablets. So outside of that, they're big. You can get, they're 22 inches or something like that. But those are the best ones. I don't know of other ones that I would necessarily trust. There's a lot of people that make them. The problem really is the capacitance that it takes to push it. It has to be perfect or it's not worth doing. Next question.
JNB from New York. Did anyone see the deep fake of Simon Cowell singing on America's Got Talent? Seems to be done fairly well.
Go ahead, John.
JHB from New York, super ironic. I watched this right before office hours started this morning. And, Adobe showed deepfake off like 5 years at Adobe Max for audio and video both. And they got a lot of negative feedback from a lot of people.
Yeah.
But this one was done okay. There's a lot of inconsistencies around the face. Simon said it was the best performer he's ever seen in America's Got Talent.
Last question for the first hour.
John Snyder from Reno, Nevada. Why has nobody built a suitable successor to HyperCard? Slide decks have some similarities. E-learning, authoring software is close, and websites are more difficult to build, but nobody seems to be building the same feature set.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things that are trying to get close to it, but you're absolutely right that we just really haven't seen a decision tree process as good as HyperCard was. I programmed a whole radio station in HyperCard. So it was, and I haven't seen anything else that does what it does. I think that the closest thing that I would say that was to HyperCard is probably Isadora. But Isadora is a little heavier than HyperCard was as far as building that out. But a lot of the stuff I did in HyperCard, I probably would try to do in Isadora. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, flat databases are sort of history, and relational databases are in. They give you more functionality. But I loved HyperCard too. I did all kinds of crazy stuff with it.
Yeah, and I could potentially do a lot of what I did in HyperCard in FileMaker. Like FileMaker would be another place that you might want to look to build some of that functionality. And it, as Mitchell was talking about, is a relational database, which is important. You can build a lot of things flat, but it does make a difference to when you start getting more complex to do that. All right, we are starting our second hour talking about AR and 3D in WWDC. Now, what I will say is that we got ourselves a little ahead of ourselves because I expected all those sessions to be to be put out on Monday, and they're trickling them out for a reason I do not know. So the main sessions are ironically today. So later today, Apple we talk about. So we'll talk a little bit about those things. But we have Josh Davies here from Artlist. Hey, Josh, how's it going?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Josh was on last year for the WWDC coverage, and I invited him back, especially given what he's been working on. It seemed like a great thing to talk about the 3D and AR. What are you working on right now, Josh?
So many different things. We have a big release about to come out of. We were purchased by Artlist. I think after we spoke with you guys when we were FX Home, we were purchased by Artlist. So we're about to do our big first release as the company's working together, but we are still working on Camtrack AR, which is our AR video recorder, which you can take straight into your post-production software to add in 3D elements, and still working on the stuff to do with our mega grant, which is associated with that, and using Unreal Engine as well. So loads of things.
Well, and what has changed over the last year for you as it relates to AR on the Apple platform?
Well, it seems like the biggest changes are about to come. So as you said, the actual sessions haven't gone live yet, but pretty much everything that has been mentioned, we're going to take full credit for, because it is all the things that we asked Apple for, and we're in our tickets relating to Camtrack AR, which was, the AR kit stuff is the best stuff in the industry. But at the same time, it was never made for content creators. It was made for entertainment, and it was made for working on the maximum amount of devices. And the thing that we went to Apple with was like, well, we don't care about all the lower end devices. We care about all the high end devices and getting a better quality footage and better quality session in AR kit. So it appears that they have answered that. So we're looking.
And when you say they've answered it, what changes have they made that affect you?
Well, I think, the big problem with ARKit when it came to doing it for creative work was that it limits the quality from the camera. It's not just the resolution, because it is HD, but it's like they're taking it off the sensor without debayering it or something like that, or they're doing some actual edge detection on it to be able to make the optical tracking better. So the actual video you get, if you have your iPhone 12 Pro and just use the camera app in HD, and then you use an AR session, it's massively lower quality in the AR session. So you can't even basically do HD well enough, let alone moving up to UHD. Whereas it appears now, one of the things that they've focused on is quality. They're majoring on this being something that content creators can use just as much as entertainment producers. And they're actually doing full 4K HDR in the AR session and giving us access to the camera to change the settings without using hacks and hopefully get those frames back at full quality as well. So it's actually pretty revolutionary. What we made before was like a bodge of techniques to make something that was cool and functional for creators wanting to try something. It could actually now be a proper production tool.
Now, and specifically with the HDR, is it something that are you able to render the AR in HDR as well as it's capturing the video in HDR?
That's what appears to be the case from reading the spiel so far. So yeah, we are currently installing, because you're doing to use the latest version of Xcode, you also have to install the beta version of macOS. So, we're halfway through a production cycle and people are like a little bit scared installing all of the beta software. But yeah, we're working on this at the moment to try and actually ascertain whether it has answered everything we want. I think one thing they won't have answered is frame rate control. A lot of the users out there have said, oh, great, I can, get an AR session at 60 frames a second, but I don't want it at that. I want it at 30, which, you can do a hack to get to 30, but then there's people wanting 24 and 25. There's nothing you can do. So
is there a maximum limit to that? Is it, can you go up to 120, for instance? Because that would be more seamless.
It's like literally hard coded in at 60. So, that's the way that they've made it. And to do 30, you just drop every other frame. Which is not the way that you do 30 frames a second, but it gives an approximation of it. So we're yet to see whether we're going to get some frame rate control in there. There may well be all sorts of technical reasons why it's hard for them to move away from 60 frames a second. It may be like the actual refresh rate of the gyroscopes and the other aspects, including the refresh rate of the LiDAR camera. Right. So, if they're all got the same refresh rate and they're all working in phase together, it makes their whole job a lot easier than if you're trying to change the frame rate of the video and then those other devices are still forced to be running at 60 or 120 hertz. So we'll see. We'll find out very soon.
Well, and what would be would be the reason that you want to go to 30 frames a second, just because you want more rendering resolution, or?
I think it's because a lot of content producers on the the more quick turnaround don't want to be rendering twice the amount of frames. So, if their content is destined for YouTube, then can they get it out quicker if they're only rendering 30 frames a second rather than 60? And the answer is potentially yes. And you can get more real-time performance as well.
Yeah, no, the real-time performance with the weight of the engine, I think makes sense. I produce a lot of content, and our content is slowly, there's lots of frame rates. And the three frame rates that we're dealing with the most right now are 24 frames a second, because filmmakers want 24 frames a second, 60 frames a second because for live experiences, it just looks way more visceral, and 120 frames per second because once we get over the mid 90s, it looks like a window. Like when you're looking at something, it no longer looks like video. Your brain starts to process it differently, and we start to see something different when we get over somewhere in the 90 to 95 frame per second. Your brain starts looking at it differently. And so a lot of us are sitting on the outside of doing these 120 frame per second tests. So we feel like, the Apple TV is capable of 120 frames per second. The camera, a lot of the devices are capable of that. They definitely have the horsepower to do it. But we haven't seen a lot of people dive into that. Every TV you buy is capable of 120 frames a second, obviously, oftentimes 240 frames a second. So they're all there, and feels like it's just waiting. It's like just a whole bunch of fuel in the air, just waiting for something to spark, into that system. Have you done anything at 120?
No, unless we're trying to slow it down. No, not at the moment. Right. I think, there's obviously, particularly when you're trying to do an AR session and you're trying to add larger objects into it, slowing stuff down can give everything, that greater weight and things like that. Yeah. So it's an old trick for, all sorts of stop motion and everything like that. But we haven't experimented with moving it to that because we know on the Apple side it won't do it. And even looking at what HTC is putting out there with the Vive and the Mars system, again, I think they're having enough work getting it working correctly and in sync at 60 frames a second.
Right.
But it will go that way.
What kind of weight? How heavy can you make the geometry and texture maps right now and have it work seamlessly on the phone?
You can. I mean, it seems miraculous compared to say 5 years ago what actually is possible, particularly if you are very efficient at making your 3D models. Mm-hmm. For our creatives, they want to see it as close as possible to the final actual output, which means we're still better off using Unreal Engine. But the majority of users that we're seeing in the professional sphere using Camtrack AR are people doing previs work, stunt coordinators, stuff like that. And they're not even using 3D. They go to the 3D department on a Disney feature and say, oh, can you give me this backdrop at this resolution I can run on my phone? And they typically go, no. So instead, what they're doing is they take a bunch of photos and they just, put them up as place cards in the background and position those in 3D, then record all of the content. So all they're ever looking for is workflow, performance gains, where they're like, oh, I just want to be able to capture everything on the device without ever going to a computer and show it to the director or the cinematographer and say, this is what we're aiming for. So we have the people that are actually trying to make 3D content, and then just people trying to augment reality for doing dailies on a film. So it's got very different use cases at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, most of the stuff that I've done in the last couple of years, it depends on how far back you want to go, but on an iPhone 10 and above, we found that we keep the performance up at about 2 million polygons, in a 2048, texture maps, which is about which when I started in gaming 20 years ago, on my budget was about 3,000 polygons for the whole level. like the whole level was 3,000 polygons. So I just feel like I'm in a pretty big space now. Do you see anyone using object capture, for some of that, or 3D object capture?
I see people experimenting with it, but I don't think it's become predictable enough in a lot of cases that you can actually make sure you're going to be able to use it in a workflow. I think this is, again, one of the things that AR kits suddenly got to a point, particularly for this previous work, where it was accurate enough and was working enough of the time that you would accept it in a workflow. The actual object capture still feels like it needs to be a little bit, you need to have a very controlled environment. And if you're going to do that, then you probably want to do it at an even higher quality, using other photogrammetry ways of doing it, which you may be slower, but then if you care about the quality, it doesn't really matter. I think it's definitely interesting what they've done with this release, because they've also got the room kit where it can subdivide the room and give all sorts of, it's using AI to identify different elements in the room and then actually making a 3D model for you rather than just this sort of scattered mesh. So I think they are persisting along this road that they're going towards with the much talked about AR sort of glasses and stuff that might come down the road. All of these feel like kits and APIs that you're going to need if you're going to build experiences for something like that.
Yeah, I feel like we'll see what happens, but I really feel like we're seeing probably one of the most in-depth, long-term rollouts ever. Like when you really think about this, and I have no idea whether Apple is ahead or behind or anything else or even if a headset really is going to happen. Most people think it does, but who knows? But what's interesting is that this is where we really felt like both Oculus, as well as HTC, as well as Google before them, really failed, was the inability to build the ecosystem. So you could build the technology, and I think that there was an assumption that if you build it, they will come. And it was just too hard for everyone to get there. Like it was just, so and that was the heavy lift. And what it appears that Apple is doing with this process is really carefully building out a very robust ecosystem of being able to generate the content that you want before the device that you need it for exists. And so a lot of it seems random, but I think that a lot of it fits into a much larger piece. Would you agree?
I totally agree. I think, they've done it before, and Google have as well, with maps and things like that. They build an infrastructure, they build a set of tools that seem somewhat strange at first, but you can kind of over time realize where they're going with it. And for Apple, I think the thing they do very well is they get things into developers' hands, and then they actually, you know, kind of inform the developers about how to use them. And they do a good job of supporting the developers in using them as well. So I think, you know, when it comes to all of the stuff around ARKit, I was surprised it was so far down on the list. But I think, you know, when it comes to the keynote this time, each time we get to WWDC, it seems to be the keynote's less about developers and is more about product. And that's definitely true this time. But I think, you know, actually the stuff that they're putting out there on the AR side is definitely trying to build us into getting used to using these kind of APIs, so that once they get to a killer device for AR and for VR, we're already experienced.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny, we see it leaking out in some areas. When I'm on Amazon on my phone, okay, I was looking for a shelf to go under my TV, and there's a little button there that says, do you want to see it in your room? And I was like, I clicked on it, and boom, it literally on my phone knew what the scale was, set it right, found the wall and the floor, and just put it right where it needed to be almost effortlessly.
Yeah.
I was kind of amazed about that, in scale and lit by the room, and looked like I could totally visualize that I didn't want that one. so I definitely knew that was the wrong one, but I wouldn't have known that. I would have ordered it, and I would have built it and done all the things, you know, all the swearing that's required to build anything that comes in from Amazon in pieces. And after all of that, I wouldn't have something I wanted. So I think that it was a huge value for me. And I think that that's the other thing people forget, is that it's not just games, it's not just entertainment. You know, Amazon has, I think this is known, but they have a lot of people building models. There's a lot of people building 3D models. They have, in the factories in China, they literally have whole rooms that they're taking pictures of couches and, you know, things, anything that has a certain sales flow at Amazon is getting 3D models that for furniture and so on and so forth. And so it's you know, and the rumor is there's a lot of companies doing that, regardless of how much we see it or how much it's available to us. You know, Home Depot and many others are building a lot. IKEA, obviously, we literally had an IKEA team that built ideas around this in Pixel Core 20 years ago. We were like, eventually this is going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's the whole, you know, there has to be all of this legwork up front for the metaverse, as it were. Yeah. But like, yeah, it's, you know, I work now for a creative content company that makes video and makes audio and makes music at a very high level. And definitely there are discussions there around 3D and how much of a, you know, commodity that will become, because, you know, until recently, it's still been the case that, you know, even, you know, to get into 3D, you have to really begin to nerd out on it. It's like, none of the files work. You get them and the textures don't work, and the scale is wrong compared to the other thing that you bring in, and the floor plane is wrong. All of these things are, you know, actually being looked at now. You know, Apple has some great formats that take all of the worry out of things. There's other things being bought by Epic. You know, they actually also have great formats that take all the complication out, they add animation in and all of those kind of things. So slowly, you know, it's going to be like, you know, a JPEG or something like that these files are going to be easy for us to use. But the only way you really can consume 3D in an exciting way is, you know, once you actually start putting it in an environment, be that an entirely virtual environment or into your actual physical environment. So I think, you know, the building blocks, as you say, are there. It's probably a bit of a long game, but it's not like, you know, Apple haven't got plenty of other stuff going on, like making really interesting decisions with processors and hardware decoding of video and all these kind of cool stuff as well. So, yeah, you know, they'll get there when they want to get there, I think.
When you're building 3D models, what's your pipeline right now to build I assume to output USDZ? How are you approaching that?
We use all of Apple's own tools. So internally, we have quite a specific remit to try and do stuff the same way that our users are going to do it. So, you know, we could install all the different software and try it all out. And we do that more from like, you know, to try and just inspect other people's tools. But our users tell us what they're using is Blender. And then they're, oh, 1 second. That's terrible. People calling me. So we tend to use the tools that our users use. So on the Mac, they're going to use Blender, and then they're going to use Apple's own converter tool to convert it into USDZ, and then we can take that into our product or take that into Xcode. So, you know, we don't export it directly from Blender with any of the tools that are there. We actually do just convert it with Apple's own tools, because then we get kind of a guaranteed experience.
And are you doing? Are you exporting from Blender, OBJ, or GLB, or what's the best format to get it out?
Yeah, I think best format is the one that works. So yeah, we typically, a lot of the stuff that our users get is OBJs, because they're looking for free content or low price content on the internet. And when you go to 3D models, it'd be great if they were all in, the maybe more modern formats, but downloading OBJs, relinking textures, trying to work out those kind of issues. The user tends to do that in Blender, and then they will export from Blender into a format that they can maybe back into an OBJ or back into another format to take it into Apple's tool to convert it there. So, we tend to use a multitude of tools, but then we talk to our users, be they the sort of low end or even the medium end, and that does tend to be the way that they're doing it as well. But then it's it will always work on an iPad or on an iPhone very efficiently. We've never really had any problems when we've used Apple's converter, but if we've used other ways of creating it, sometimes they can be more finicky.
Yeah, I mean, we've really dealt with this a lot, and the two that are the most robust right now are Maya and Houdini, and I think that has to do with the fact that they are, they're used in Pixar, so they're a lot more, because a USDZ, of course, for those listening, is the Universal Scene Description, which was developed by Pixar. USDZ is just a binary that's been zipped, that's the format that is there. So it's just the Pixar format, scene description, which carries, again, it can carry animation and as well as texture, lighting, etc. So that is becoming the format. And I think that we've done a lot of experiments with those things. Cinema 4D, and then every version gets better at it, but it's not there yet. Blender's definitely not there yet. The one that we find that is the highest quality that we've been able to kind of muster out, if we build our UVs inside of Cinema or other apps like that, is actually Adobe Substance. The problem is the roundabout way of getting to it is that you build everything in Substance. You can texture it all out. You can build it all out, and there's just great texturing tools inside of Substance. But you have to export export textures, and one of them is export textures with USDZ. So it literally generates this huge pile of textures that you don't need. And it has one little file that says USDZ, and that has all the textures on it, and it's all embedded. So it's a weird, Chris Fritchie in our group figured it out, and it is relatively inexpensive. I mean, it's like $50 a month or something, so it's not free. But Substance has become the pipeline for us from a low cost perspective of getting those things built out. I think that the trouble that we've had with or reality converter. We've definitely used a lot. It's just that, I don't know if you've noticed this, but the fine details of signing everything inside of Converter it's a little chunky.
Well, yeah, I think, again, probably our users are looking for for different qualities from what they're trying to do. It being entirely free is one of them. So, they will accept an awful lot just to get something working. And I must admit, and loads of them are still doing most of their 3D work in Unreal, even when they use our product. So they'll use our product, they'll put in some temp 3D objects, maybe, just represent maybe a quarter of their scene. Right. They'll bring that in, they'll do their video work, and then they'll take that camera, put it into Unreal, export from Unreal, and then comp it all together in our product or in After Effects or something like that. So they just become temp objects, and sometimes they're not even having textures and things like that. It means nothing to them. It's more about, the positional of where the character is or what's against the green screen is versus the background. Yeah,
for us, we're trying to do photoreal objects. So we're trying to how close. And we have found, for those watching, you can see one of the examples that Chris Fritchie actually built was if you go to clarity.io and look for the object, you can see an object there that's like when you set it next to the real thing, it's pretty close. Not 100%, but you get a pretty good idea of what that object's going to look like in the real world. And so it's a pretty useful process. John, you had a couple comments?
Yeah, so the gentleman from the UK has done a fine job articulating what's going on with Apple, but they did release, I would say, 3.5 videos related to AR yesterday. And if you have a developer account, they're all there. So the coolest one I saw yesterday was Room Plan, which you guys talked about, and I'm sure that Polycam's going to integrate integrate those new methods into their next iteration of their software. And then the two sessions today are the USD presentations are today, and then tomorrow is Discover ARKit 6, and so that's kind of the schedule for the ongoing sessions. But Alex and Joshua have done a fantastic job articulating the vision that's coming.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was fascinating about Room Plan, and I think that this is where Apple really sets itself apart, is that it's 12 lines of code. like you look at it, it's like add these, it's a very, Apple is giving you a library that's going to do something amazing. And this, again, I think is what has been missing in the past, is that there's a whole bunch of lifting that has been required to do any kind of 3D. I mean, Josh, you've been kind of on the front lines of that, writing it yourself, right?
Yeah, I think, when I was looking at the RoomKit stuff, I was so thankful that they've put in a really great front end experience for the developer, because, they showed it in the video, the person moving around the room and it miraculously identifying items, doing a wireframe around them, and then building the little 3D model at the bottom. But all too often, that demo and how it's put together is not really something that's easily accessible to the developer to create something of equal quality without loads of work. When actually probably in the case of a lot of these, that part of the experience is probably not that material to what the developer is trying to build. So, that there is a front end to that, which looks brilliant. The user is just going to be able to it's going to be consistent across all apps, so that then, the tool can just focus on the other stuff. That's really, really great. We've not necessarily had that experience so far with everything. You get all of these cool videos of what you can do in ARKit, and sometimes you're like, this is great, and then you realize you actually have to build a lot of those layers up yourself. There's only debugging tools to give you references to things, and you're going to have to build the meshes, and actually just the way you display them, that all comes down to the developer. So I'm all for shortcuts like that. In the end, it's like, there's all this great technology within the device. How can we make it really easy for the user, and who's going to make a great UX? And more often than not, Apple are going to do a better job than that, than a small-time developer. So, it looks very, very polished. I imagine loads of people are going to be jumping on that straight away.
Yeah, and I think that the big challenge is, the funny thing is that as Apple keeps moving forward with a lot of these things, you feel like the developer really has to be competitive in the user experience, in the interface, in the workflow, as opposed to the technology. You no longer have to have some crazy engineer or scientist, figuring this stuff out. Apple's doing that for you, and it's just a matter of you figuring out what's a unique way to interact with it. Have you played with Reality Scan at all?
Epic. We have played with it a bit, but I think we were actually trying to scan something that was the details on it were not going to be able to be scanned, because the previous thing we'd scanned it with was one of those really big, automotive level 3D scanners. So when we've used the tools that are really fantastic, they don't necessarily pick up the level of detail. I think it's like, with the LiDAR, with the iPhone as well, people expect it to be, 0.1 of a millimeter perfect, where it's actually just big chunks. So yeah, we did some stuff, but we didn't get the results we were trying at the time. But I think, actually with some of the tutorials that we put together, we're going to try again and actually make some just sort of 3D objects to put together using HIT film.
Yeah. It's I've done a little bit of experimentation with it inside of oops, let me pull this up here. I'm trying to preview it in Sketchfab, and it's been a little bit it's a little chunky on my little older computer while Zoom's running, but this is an example for folks to look at here. Let me you can download this on the site. Let's see. So you can see this here. This is a bolt outside of our office, and now I will say that this is it's a lot of detail that it has. It really has all the all the bits and pieces there. But this was 200 photos of I have a tendency with I found out that Reality Scan allows you only 200 photos, and so all of my captures are 200 photos. It's just like, and I will do 200 photos and see how much detail I get out of it. What I really thought was interesting about it is that the UI is great. You have a really good sense, and this gets back to what we were talking about earlier. is that it's doing a lot of photogrammetry for us. I don't know. I've imagined because of Epic and because it's coming from reality capture, they may not have been using any of the Apple tools, but they have their own. But I think that I really found that the UI is really important because I have to, it gives me feedback of what I've covered and what I haven't covered. It's probably the best one so far. The beta is out, for the first 10,000 people who knew about it. I happen to, since I track it, was in that first 10,000. But I think that those kinds of capture things and the I have found that the object capture I haven't seen. Have you seen any apps that are particularly good at it? I feel like the library's been out there, and I haven't been super happy with what I've seen so far.
Yeah, I think the issues with it for us is again, the people that really want to do object capture and spend the time over it want a certain level of quality. And I think, of course, there's the perfect examples that they give on the website, but if the quality isn't necessarily there, or if they're having any kind of issue with it, they're probably more likely to be able to go to some kind of bigger setup or using, the other tools that are out there. So we've not seen people switching to it, even though it's massively quicker. I've seen still people using other apps on the iPhone that are doing everything in the cloud and taking maybe hours to send you back your 3D model, or using, more brute force traditional photogrammetry. I've still seen that be the way that people are, adopting it and using it to try and import in models. But then also there's all that cleanup process. It's the same kind of issues that you have with actual motion capture, is that everyone thinks it's a magic thing that's just going to work, but there's always this level that happens afterwards in the traditional workflows. If you're going to get the quality, you have to put additional work in, and I don't think the quality is quite there yet.
Yeah, it is. I will agree with you that a lot of times, the capture is just the beginning. Although I will say that a lot of the stuff with object capture works pretty well. It's mostly using the LiDAR, it appears, to just get edge detection, just to figure out what's there, what's not there. I kind of wish it would use it for more accurate, it does work for scale as well. I think as a user, one of the things that I really feel like I've got, old cameras, and for a variety of reasons, I'm testing a bunch of them. And the thing that I feel like is missing is being able to have one camera control one phone control 4 or 5 other phones, or as many phones as I want. So have all these phones subscribed to this phone, and then be able to have it set, be able to, as you tap it, it just fires all of them at the same time with all that LiDAR information, with all the photogrammetry. And it seems like absurd, but I could see a lot of people, because of the fact that the LiDAR camera is synced with the still camera, and the still camera is a known entity. I could see people using, an array of iPhones. It's just another way to sell lots of iPhones, but use an array of iPhones, you're just simply tapping on it and it's capturing everything at one time. Because especially if you're doing something organic, like a person, like a face, or that type of thing, you need to have that there. So
I think, this is what we're seeing with the ARKit improvements. It was made for lowest common denominator, still work on an iPhone 6, that kind of thing. And I think this is always going to be true with a lot of Apple stuff, and it's the most logical thing to do, because then you're going to get millions of people using it rather than the sort of specialist use cases, which are maybe the most exciting to us. But they are listening, it suggests what they've said about ARKit, that they are listening to, more unique and smaller use cases and enhancing the product towards those. So who knows what might come in the future. I think, Filmic Pro definitely proved that, people might want to be recording on multiple cameras inside the one device at the same time and connecting different devices to record different things, which was, never really the initial intention with the cameras inside your iPhone. So I think, it could come. And it would be really cool if, it would feel like there's an awful lot of gyroscope data. There's the LiDAR data, and then there's the actual camera and multiple focal length camera data that could be used to enhance the process of capturing things. If you had, as you say, multiple devices working at the same time.
This is an example, just so people can think about where this goes. This is this is a couple of years ago, but this is my son this is a game capture system. So there's about 150 some SLR cameras that are all being fired off at one time. Now, I'm not saying that we need that many iPhones, but it tells you how far. This is how they capture like NBA for like the the 2K stuff. Anyway, but all these cameras are firing, and those little designs around them tell them which camera that is, so it helps them sync where each camera is, and it's all automated. Even with all of those cameras, you still end up in ZBrush painting out little anomalies and other bits and pieces to make that work. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. First question.
Got a question here from Carlos Ronconi in Rio de Janeiro. He wants to know, no word about Apple Glass?
Good, John.
Like the guy said, what they're doing is they're building a foundation, right? And so ARKit and a lot of the tools, they have photogrammetry API. A lot of these stuff is being built now, and it's seeded to the developers to build stuff. So when they do release the glasses, there'll be something to look at through the glasses. It reminds me of, there's some plant that's indigenous to Japan that grows underground for like 2 years, and then in 2 weeks it grows like 30 feet. And so that's kind of the metaphor of what we're going to see with the glasses next year sometime.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I still feel like one of the things that I do a lot now, because I've gotten used to using USDZ for a lot of things, is I get used to opening those models in preview, and then because it's supported in preview, I rotate it around to where I want it, and then I do a screen capture, take it into take it into Keynote, and hit get rid of the instant alpha or whatever to get rid of the edges, and now I have a 3D model exactly in the orientation that I wanted it in my model. And by the way, for some things, a note to everyone is Smithsonian has tons of USDZ models and definitely lots of OBJs that you can convert through Reality Converter to grab lots of 3D models. And so anyway, I'm able to place those all the time. And every time I do it, I'm like, at some point, this all has to be in Keynote. Like I have to be able to rotate this around in Keynote. And so I feel like when that happens, when the Office apps get it, I just think it's going to create this massive explosion of 3D models that are all in USDZ because, suddenly it's this competitive edge every time you build a presentation. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, could you see Apple supporting MetaQuest Link or a similar protocol to link an existing headset to your Mac?
Josh, do you see that in the future?
I think there are issues here. I mean, it's great. It's a great idea, but I think we have Apple are going down a very set road with what they're doing in terms of placing a high importance on power efficiency. So, they talk about you couldn't run a Quest on at least if you look at unit sales on 99% of the Mac hardware that's sold at the moment, it wouldn't, especially if you're then also having to encode it and send it over Wi-Fi. It's like, it wouldn't be a good experience. Your VR wants more power than that. And that isn't necessarily where Apple are focusing for good reason. But yeah, it's, that's why you still run Unreal on a 3090 and cost the earth in terms of power and all of those kind of things. And VR is still there. Now, I imagine what we're going to end up seeing is the slant that they have with their chips, which at the moment is, these 8-core or 10-core chips, and then the GPU doubling in size each time. I imagine what we're going to see is a super efficient, low core count chip that then actually has the beefy GPU beside it by the time we get towards like Apple Glass and stuff like that. But then it's going to be, on the device instead and things like that, because that will always give the best experience. Like Oculus Link, it's fantastic, but still the most seamless, awesome experience you can have in an Oculus is when you just put it on your head and you get the controllers. There's no PC and there's no connecting and everything. It just works. And Apple would want to do that, but way better.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that works. The biggest challenge is that it really turns out that this high frame rate and high resolution becomes really, really important, and that's super hard to do. As Josh was talking about. So what we've found in a bunch of research that we've done in the past is that you really want it to be 6 to 8K per eye. Like that's the resolution that you want to see it in VR. And you really want it to be above 90 frames a second, and in the 120 frame per second range. When you get to those resolutions, it becomes a different experience. There's the only headsets that do that are these big headsets with these huge cables that you could, and they're hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars each, that do that, the R&D headsets that people are using to do those. And, but it is a completely different experience than what we see. And the hard part is getting that into a consumer thing that costs less than, $50,000 has not been trivial. And
I think the good thing to see though is Apple, in terms of Metal, have added the idea of actually doing hardware based or machine learning based upscaling of lower resolution, but trying to give you 99% of the quality at a higher resolution. You know, NVIDIA has been doing this for a while and everything, and Sony with VR in the past has tried to do upscaling of frame rates with weird, which is bad with VR because you get out of sync potentially if you haven't got a frame rate high enough. But that Apple is looking at these technologies again could prove potentially that they would have a very low powered device with a decent amount of graphics prowess that then can upscale it to give you a really good result on their own devices. Again, that doesn't really work when you're talking about something like Oculus Link.
Yeah, and I think that the thing is like, I did think about that a little bit when they're talking about the scaling. I was like, well, that kind of makes sense for games, kind of makes sense for video, really makes sense for AR, you know, to be able to upscale frame rate as well as resolution. Next question.
John Preto on the panel from Las Vegas. Joshua, first, you win the award for the best looking sounding guest we've had on. Bravo. And are you guys doing anything with any RFs?
Nerfs.
I don't know how to respond to this flattery. It's fantastic. No, I would say at the moment we're not. But it's, you know, it's something that we'll be looking into, but we're not at the moment.
Yeah, and for those listening, a NERF is a neural radiance field, and it's a process of using AI to build, you know, as an assistant to create the 3D objects from two-dimensional photos. It's a different version of what we're talking about with. I mean, we could do a whole hour on NERFs, which we will save for it. But it's definitely a lot of us think that it's part of the future. So we'll work on getting some folks in to talk about it specifically. Next question.
Jason Panks from Nashville, Tennessee. What are you most excited about for AR that Apple announced at WWDC?
Josh, do you have anything
specific? Resolution. And if we're getting the full quality off the sensor rather than a reduced quality thing, I think it makes a lot of the AR creative applications out there, they go from being a demo, a tech demo, something fun to play with, into something that people can actually use, particularly schools and education. Suddenly the quality is good enough. People can take it more seriously, which means people will make some really interesting apps that we haven't even thought of so far.
Yeah, and I think that we want to think about education, not just K through 12 or college, but really all things that you need to learn something about. You know, I really feel like there's going to be an explosion, and this is why I get so excited about it, is there's an explosion of all training materials. Training, and we've talked about this on the show many times, but training is the thing that makes your product sticky, you know, because once someone learns it, they don't want to learn something new. Like, people say they like to learn new things, but they don't like to learn new things about everything. And the example that I've used in the past is that my microwave is highly commoditized because I don't understand any of it. Every time I push on a button, it says refer to the manual, which I lost. You know, I bought, it came with the house. The microwave came with the house. It was installed on the wall. And so it's like, sure, I have no idea where that manual is. And so all I know how to do is power and time, right? That's the only thing I understand about my microwave is power and time. So when I go to get a new microwave, the chances of me going back to the one that I have is very low because I don't really care. You know, like, I'm just going to look for a bunch of features and put it in there. Being able to have something that trains me on how to use that, puts it together, you know, how to put it together, how to get the very most out of all those things would make a big difference, because now I'm a master of that microwave, and I would be much less likely to be interested in a new interface. In the same way, I mean, I always feel like the perfect example, again, which is why years ago we built the IKEA, what we called the IKEA team, was that, man, we really need an interactive guide on how to build some of that furniture. So the, you know, like, and so being able to see it and have it be able to react to it, like you just point down at it. Yeah, I built a hammock out back, and it seems simple, but when you started putting it together, it was the worst instructions ever. And it was a simple process. And I was like, I really want to build this in AR and send it back to them. Like, I just want to send an AR, like, you could have just pointed down and it could have shown you what to do. It didn't have to be, you know, so complicated. So anyway, I think that training for all things that we use and all skills, you know, will make a big difference. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is here, and he wants to know, could I work with ARKit on an iPhone 13? Can't afford a Pro or a Pro Max.
Go ahead, Josh.
Absolutely. In fact, it should work pretty well. The LiDAR definitely helps on the Pro devices, but it isn't actually the main form of tracking. I think, as Alex said earlier on, it basically just uses the LiDAR to inform the optical tracking that it's doing. Like, is this a hard edge, really a hard edge? Is it really a pointy edge? Oh, it really is. I can see that in the LiDAR as well. Doesn't mean the Apple can't, the iPhone can't do a great job without it. And it does do a really good job. It's the best in class without LiDAR being attached as well. So yeah, you can definitely use ARKit. You can definitely build stuff. It's just the experience steps up a little bit more when you have the LiDAR as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say that some of the effects, there's an app that Apple put out. What is the one that you can kind of it has all these party effects and everything else on it. I can't think of the name of it right now.
Yeah, that does all the cool, like you're halfway underwater and
there's some, you can see that Apple is having fun playing with it. One thing that I really feel like Apple's missing out on is using the stores as a platform for AR experiences, of saying you walk into a store and it says, hey, would you like to, see, something and tell people, like, this week you could explore the Amazon in the Apple stores, or you could explore the, and it's built so that it's built around the actual store. I know it seems like a lot of work, but if Apple really wanted to get people excited about it, knowing that you could go to the store every week or every month and see something completely different and wander around and everything else, you'd end up with like hundreds of people with their phones, but it would be a little geeky, but I think it would get people excited. Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
I always wonder why they haven't done the near field stuff, which, that happens when you go into an Apple store, but why Tesla and other people aren't pushing an app to your phone, because you have all these micro apps now and stuff like that as well, that when you go in there into the dealership, you can spec the car on your phone and actually have it beside the car that's in the actual dealership. Right. And that, it even like imposes it over it and stuff like that. I know when I got my last car, I got the app and I was in my living room trying to like position the car, but because the car was actual car scale, it wouldn't fit within my living room. So I had to make a little toy version and get it to scale down. But it's like, if it was like an experience that drew you into the dealerships or drew you into these kind of shops as well, it could be really exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Next question.
Jason Panks in Nashville, Tennessee. Did Apple release any updates that may improve object capturing to USDZ workflows?
I think those would have been the videos today that we haven't had time to see yet.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they have done anything. I know they're really pushing USDZ as the way forward for everything 3D on the Apple platform. So it's surprising, as you said, that they haven't actually put this into their own, office style apps yet. It's like, it feels like it should be there.
Yeah, it just feels like because it seems like that would make it the standard. Like it would, among many things, because it would be very complicated for it would basically mean that everybody would have to incorporate USDZ into the whole system, because PowerPoint would have to follow along. Once you have 3D objects in Keynote, PowerPoint and Google Slides would have to figure it out, and they would have to figure out how to use USDZ, which is an open format. It's not like it costs anybody any money to use, but it would definitely force it to the forefront of the process. It'll be interesting to see if that ever happens. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, can the iPhone 13 produce photogrammetry without LiDAR?
Yep, absolutely. The majority of photogrammetry is just the photographic aspect. There's very few things that actually do make any use of the LiDAR outside what Apple have done themselves potentially. So yeah, there are lots of photos taken in a sensible manner with even lighting conditions that don't vastly change and no shadows and stuff like that. That's the traditional way to do photogrammetry. And there's many great tools out there, free or paid, that can do amazing jobs with just whatever camera you've got is the one that you can use.
Yeah, and when I first started doing photogrammetry, it was in the mid '90s, and we were doing it by hand. So what we would do is we would put a block. We would literally start by putting, you just put a cube, and you'd figure out how to change the position of the camera and the focal length until it matched the vanishing points that were in the so it just looked like it belonged there. So we put the cube in there. Now sometimes we were able to, if we knew we were going to build a scene, we would drop a cube into the scene that we knew that was a 1x1, with a checkers or whatever, that we could just drop one cube in there. Once we match that cube from a camera position, we know that we have the right focal length, and then we would literally start just putting cubes out where we knew things were. and just start building it up until we got the basic pieces of it. And then we would start adding more to it. Now, a lot of times what we were doing is then camera mapping, or what was back in the day called make sticky. But camera mapping, which means from the point of view of that camera, we're just going to project a texture map out to all the objects, make it look fairly realistic. So that was the early days of photogrammetry in the 94, 95 range. Then it got a lot easier with Match Mover or Image Modeler, which was the big one that happened in the 2000s. And then now it's just become, so for me, I'm always like, just feel like it's ice cream all day. Like compared to what I'm used to, compared to what I started, I was like, when anybody complains about photogrammetry, I'm like, you have no idea like what it used to take to do this. And the main thing is with all of these things is that if you have that object that's there, when you think about photogrammetry, you want to make sure that you're taking pictures straight on doesn't have any parallax. You want to think about parallax lines. So parallax informs it, the distort of how things are disappearing is what informs the machine on what's actually happening. So straight lines without parallax, I mean, straight aheads are not nearly as valuable. They are valuable for texturing, so you might want to throw some of those in. But mostly what you want is, I meant to just get rid of part of that. Anyway, you want things that are on corners like this, and you want them to overlap like this, because it's important that these things are overlapping here, because what's going to happen is you want to see those vanishing points, but you also want them to have details, because the first thing it does is it goes, I'm going to look at all these things and try to find things in the scene that are all the same. I identify this detail and this detail and this detail, and it's going to find as many as it can and draw those patches back together. Then it's going to figure out where, from there, it figures out what those vanishing points are, and that allows it to capture the camera position and the distortion. And then from there, it starts to build the model. And it does. And photogrammetry is only limited by the resolution of the camera. So if we actually get 48 megapixel cameras in the fall, that's rumored, from a photogrammetry perspective, it's going to be pretty nifty. Like it's going to make a big difference. Next question.
Eddie Scott from Mission Viejo. How long before we get AR pizza with flavor?
Go ahead, Tom.
Keep the flavor, but not the calories. That would redefine the all-you-can-eat buffet. Sign me up.
There you go, Mitchell.
They can't do it properly till they can model 3D pineapple.
Oh, go ahead, John.
I just got the email on this. It's scheduled to come out March 14th, 3033.
All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael, could you see AR and a Reality OS-based headset which deeply integrates with macOS being game-changing for education?
I think we talked about it a little bit, but Josh, you would agree with that?
I would love to, like in an alternative reality to my own, do anything to do with AR and VR and education. I think, as a tool to actually get people engrossed in different experiences, going to historical places and seeing them in different states and as they were built. I mean, there's the experience of the Empire State where you see, all the different states of it being built. But if I could stand outside with the headset and actually see it being built in front of me and then it going to the final thing, I think, you can make so many different things really engaging and engrossing. Chemistry, where you can't necessarily afford as a school now to have all the different chemicals that do all the different things when you pop them in a test tube, like the really fun ones that blow up and all of those kind of things. I think, if there was money in it and someone could do it, this sounds like just about the coolest thing to be making. Yeah,
you could do all those frog dissections without all the formaldehyde.
Absolutely.
That would be great. One of the pitches that we had that went by that never happened, but it had me really think about this for a little while, was we almost did a project in Gettysburg where you could walk up to you see a circle that was going to be about a foot, and it just had a little symbol that you can visualize something here. So you're wandering around Gettysburg, you walk up, and Josh, you're not from the United States, but Gettysburg, big battle. So
no, I've heard of it. So
okay. So we a lot of people were there. So anyway, you walk up to it, stand on it, and put on. And this time it was Google Cardboard, which is what we were working on. But the idea is when you put your headset on, it would still look like what you saw there before, but then it would fade into an experience where suddenly you see these cannons appear, and then you see this pop, and then you hear the balls go by you, that are going there. And then the idea was then you'd start hearing the, and you'd see pickets charge, like people walking past you, and towards it. And then you start to experience what it was like to be standing there, and at that day. And, I think it's July 2nd or July 3rd on 1863. And so the idea is that you would be able to walk it to Little Round Top. You'd be able to walk to, all the different areas, Devil's Den and all these areas, and visualize what the battle would have looked like when you were, if you were standing there. And that would be, it changes education completely. Like if you're, and that's just as you of course experience those not at the field, but being able to stand there, see what it was like, and then come back to it would be a really interesting model. Someone else should do that someday. So we pitched it. It was a great pitch, and it was expensive to do it. That was the kicker. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, Illuminarium, and there's a link to it, is an immersive experience that uses projection to create virtual environments for a large audience. Can you say ARKit or similar technology bringing that into the home?
Josh?
Well, I haven't actually seen this one, but I think, that's definitely where, Facebook have been looking at doing stuff with Quest, is to try and, I guess during COVID, everyone was thinking about this, but it's the experience side of things. And I think it depends where Apple want to go with this, but if they go the way that everyone's predicting with the Google, with the Apple headset of some kind, then for sure, I think, this kind of thing is going to come into it. Apple have all of the infrastructure on all the different levels to be able to broadcast huge pieces of content, get the people that people would want to see, and do all of these kind of things. So I think this is definitely going to happen. I think all the experiments so far have been interesting, even into the video game world, where they're putting, into non-VR games, they're putting pop stars and things like that and having virtual experiences. I think there's just, again, it's this ecosystem that we see that Apple are putting together of all the different type of toolkits that you're going to need to be able to make an interesting experience. Apple is just doing it bit by bit. I hope with the idea that they're going to release something and then people can make great content from day one. And this would be the kind of content I would imagine people would make.
Yeah, absolutely, John.
Yeah, Luminarium's here in Las Vegas, and AR, absolutely, the answer is yes. But to visualize, there's one on the market right now that lets you visualize circuitry, and so you can see the electrons and how they're flowing and how they're going through the different devices. It's absolutely amazing. I want one for my network so I can see where the Dante traffic is going and the DMX traffic.
One of the things that I've really wanted is to be able to have a router. And if you put on the goggles, you could just put your finger on an input and it would tell you, like, it just has a little bit of, if it just had registration around it, so it knew where it was looking, you just put your finger on it, a little window would pop up of, this is the video that's going through that router. And you just tap on the things to see what it was. And it's totally doable. Like, that's the funny thing is that I haven't had time to do it, but when you think about what's possible, that would be totally doable. You're just like, where is this going? Where is this going? What's the data? What's the, those kinds of things. Be really interesting. Next question.
And Douglas is back again. One of the experiences Illuminarium has in an immersive journey to a night market in Tokyo. How would you capture immersive content to a crowded environment? Could you use an iPhone Pro Max or even a 13?
Do you have any input, Josh?
Well, I think, this is the area of VR and AR where we have problems still, is if you're trying to capture an immersive experience that is, solid objects and us, converting them to 3D, which is pretty much our best way of doing things at the moment, is becoming easier and easier to render and pipe through. But actual experiences, if there's a street market and there's actual people and creatures and animals doing things, we become this weird 360 VR experience at the moment, rather than there being any real feeling of, immersion of moving around. I think this is the problem that everybody is trying to work on or trying to avoid, depending on the company at the moment. So at the moment, there's all sorts of alternative technologies for how you could actually capture whole scenes and convert that, or actually have 3D data there. I think every single one of them has significant and, at the moment, insurmountable problems, which, we know insurmountable problems right now are 3 years away from being, easier things to do. So you couldn't do it at the moment if you're trying to actually capture something where people could have actually an immersive experience, I don't think, unless it was a fixed point immersive experience.
Yeah, I was trying to pull up really quickly an example of an impossible photo that you could use for something like this. Now, number one is you may want to get, you may want to have something that you, when you watch a movie, I guess is what I would say, is that you, this is an impossible photo here. Hold on. So if you see this photo, this is from Angkor Wat. There were people there. There were a lot of people there. And somehow I got this. There are apps that basically on your iPhone that you hit and they just start caching. And so anytime something's seen, it basically removes them. So it just fills in all the gaps. So there was probably 100 people on this that were on this thing right in front of the main temple, and it removed them all. so that kind of thing can be done to remove those. Now, if it's too crowded, it never sees everything, and that becomes problematic. The other thing to look at is anytime you see a movie that any location, they cleared that location. You pay for permits, and you just pay everybody to not be there, and for an hour or two or whatever. The other thing you'll have in a night experience, of course, is capturing it without a lot of grain. So you'll have to do long. You're going to have things fixed to what Josh was talking about. You can't have people, and then you add them all back in. You add all the CG folks back in, but you having it match is difficult. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, that's fascinating because I end up having to do that, but I use Mocha Pro, and it takes a bit of time to get it right.
Yeah, I don't remember which app I was using at the time. That was 5 years ago when I was in Cambodia, but it is instant. You just push the button and and it just slowly just absorbs everything and gets rid of everything as it sees it. Photoshop has a filter that'll do that as well, but this one is just on your phone, and it was.
I wanted to capture the scene with everybody in it though. That's what, and it be immersive with the people there. But yeah, I guess if you're going to take the people out, then it sounds like a lot of post work. It
was. Yeah, it's. I think that the problem is that capturing them is still a challenge, as you said, because you have to see them from every angle. You have to see all those other things. So that's the harder part there. Next question.
And it looks like the last question we have here for today. How would you get the raw immersive model video content off the phone? I've used MacroPlant's iExplorer. There's a link there. But are there other ways?
Josh, how does your app get it off the phone? Is it just save it out?
Yeah, we asked the users what they wanted to do, and we save it basically into their files on their device, and it syncs over iCloud. So all we did is make sure we saved absolutely everything. So we've got the video with and without visual effects. We've got 3D data. We also export all of it out in a sort of JSON format for the camera data, and we save the camera out as an FBX file as well. But we put the JSON in there, so basically people can build what they want to build out of it. But in the end, this is something that we're actually trying to answer in our other tools and everything that we do, is that people still have this really horrible experience that they've recorded loads of stuff on their phone, and then they go to their video editor, for instance, and they're just like, but I want it there. And why isn't it there yet? And, we're all got peer-to-peer networking capabilities within our house. It's like, why, when I open my phone, does Final Cut not go, you've recorded 6 new videos since you were last in here. Do you want me to just bring them in and put them on the timeline for you? This is what a lot of people want from that experience, rather than there's some kind of syncing going on in the background. No one's really informing what's happening. At some point, the stuff will be somewhere. This is a problem with everything, I think, between the sort of forcing you to stay in a phone or a mobile ecosystem versus your desktop one. Apple do it better than anybody else, but it's still not the experience that a lot of people understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh, thank you so much for hanging out with us and giving us your expert opinion.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely to come back again.
Yeah, great to have you. So thanks for coming. Thanks for our producers for all the great questions. Thanks to the panelists. We can't do this without you. And thanks to the great team on the back end that's putting this all together every day, 7 days a week. All right. Another reminder that I'm speaking at InfoComm virtually. You're all invited. In the email that went out this morning, you can get into the webinar, ask questions, and Sam and I will answer them as best we can this afternoon at 4:30 Pacific Standard Time. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and jump into After Hours. That was much better than I expected. I was worried. I was like, we don't have any new sessions yet. I was like, dag nabbit. They were all supposed to be released on Monday. This is what we do, Josh. We whisper
talk about being unconstrained by space and time. Well, sometimes,
we are constrained by space and time. All right, here we go.
Shibuya.